This is Talk Business and Politics with Roby Brock.
Joining me now is Mike Preston, Arkansas Secretary of Commerce and leader of the Arkansas Economic Development Commission. And he has got a big feather in his cap this week with the U.S. Steel announcement that they will locate a $3 billion steel mill factory in Northeast Arkansas near Osceola. Congratulations, Mike. And give me some background on how this deal came together, how quickly it came together, and how proud you are of this.
Sure. Well, thank you, Roby. And it's a feather in the state's cap because it was a team effort. It was a local, regional, state effort to get this all done. A lot of people, and my hats off to the entire team at AEDC and within the Department of Commerce. I think everyone in some shape or form had a role in making this happen. And obviously the local community there in Mississippi County and Osceola played such a big part. Entergy, BNSF Railroad, obviously the General Assembly stepped up to the plate, went into a special session, gave us the tools, the ability to put a package together that was, comparable to a project this size, and it allowed us to compete and ultimately win. And then, my hat's off to the governor because he got engaged very early on this project, and it was a very fast project. Some, times we work a project and it'll be, 12, 16, 18 months. This one, I think we took the first phone call the 1st of September. And to show the governor's involvement and commitment, he got on that very first phone call that we had with the U.S. Steel CEO, made his commitment to the U.S. Steel CEO that we would give it our all. We wanted the project here. He had a couple of subsequent conversations with the CEO, so he was engaged in that process. But fast forward to the 1st of September when we started working it, it was announced publicly mid-September that they were eyeing several states. I think they'd done their due diligence at that point, but then we did a lot of groundwork the rest of September, October, leading up to the special session that took place the first week of December. And that's when we came together with the General Assembly and in 2 days passed the legislative package that allowed us to compete on the project, all working simultaneously on the site, other incentives, the utilities, the rail, everything else that went into the project. And then last week, it was announced that in a conversation with the CEO and the governor again, that they had selected Osceola, Arkansas for the site. And we're there. They've made the announcement. Now we still have to finalize our incentive agreement. They still got to go to the Public Service Commission to get the sign off on their utility deal. And then the teacher retirement in regards to our recycling tax credit that was. With all hope, we're looking at shovel in the ground sometime first quarter of 2022.
So let's talk about a couple you knew that one of your competitors, maybe two of your competitors, Alabama and Mississippi, were in the running for this plant. Mm-hmm. You compete against them for many other projects as well. Why do you think Arkansas was more, why did we have the winning bid over those other states? What do you think sealed it?
They looked all over the Southeast and ultimately it came down to those three states that you mentioned in Alabama, Mississippi, and Arkansas. And I think it could have worked in any of the three of those. There's, all three of the states have good locations. U.S. Steel has an existing presence in Alabama. They have some existing mills that they could have built adjacent to or utilized. But ultimately, when they made the investment in Arkansas and purchased Big River Steel, initially a 49% stake, and then the remaining stake of that about a year ago, they saw what Arkansas has to offer firsthand. They saw what a great area it is for steel production in Mississippi County with the access to the river and the rail, the highways, the flat land that we have. But ultimately, that workforce that we have there in Northeast Arkansas in the steel industry, the commitment that they've done, the record numbers that that the county has put up, both through Big River Steel, Nucor Steel, and all the other steel industry that takes place in there. Our workforce is second to none, and I think that really set us apart. And then how we were able to come together as a state and collaboratively make this project happen. The partnership between Mississippi County, the state, Entergy, BNSF Railroad, the legislature, the governor, all coming together and getting on the same page to say, you know what, maybe we don't always all agree on everything, but on this and in terms of jobs, we all agree and we're going to figure out a way to get this done. And that meant something to the company. I shared this earlier with some folks that when we had the call with the CEO and he told the governor that they were coming to Arkansas, one thing he mentioned is that, You know, Governor, you've built a business climate in Arkansas that's conducive to companies, to the steel industry. You have a climate and a fiscal condition of your state that companies look at. And we took that into account, and don't let that, anybody tell you any different, because that was very important to us. And the work that you all have done in the last 7 years made a difference.
You mentioned the incentives that the legislature passed. You've got some incentives that you don't need legislative permission for because they're within the agency and within your purview. There also had to be a cost benefit analysis. That was a trigger point for some of the incentives that the legislature approved. What does that cost benefit analysis look like? I haven't seen it publicly disclosed. I don't know if it will be, but give me some perspective on how beneficial this will be versus what we have to invest in this.
Yeah. So that is something that we don't release publicly, is our cost benefit, because that's something that's proprietary. When we look at economic development projects, we don't want people knowing exactly what our inputs and outputs are, because then they could, utilize it to try to, get the most advantageous deal that they possibly can. Obviously, we want to be, responsible to the taxpayers of Arkansas, making sure that we're getting the best bang for our buck. So when we talk about terms of cost benefit analysis to the state, what we measure is tax dollars that we are putting into the project in the terms of incentives, whatever package that might be, versus state tax dollars coming back into the state. So ultimately, we will recruit more state tax dollars back into the state from what we're putting in than what went out. So that doesn't take into account the local taxes that are paid, on purchase of equipment or other things like that, or sales tax. Those things all play in and really help the economy. So ultimately, what it means is 900 jobs coming into Mississippi County, paying an average wage in excess of $100,000 per year. That's $95 million in annual payroll going into that community, on top of the $3 billion investment in the facility, the equipment that's going into there. And so those indirect jobs that, support those 900 jobs, the multiplier we look at tells us about 2.83 jobs per every direct job created. So that's another, 2,500 indirect jobs in every industry that's either, supply chain or just ancillary jobs that will grow naturally out of this project like this.
I heard the mayor of Osceola in an interview, just think last night, talk about the fact that she's already been contacted by somebody who wants to build a new subdivision up there with 60 homes in it. So that's another ripple effect there. Let's talk about what this positions Arkansas for beyond this big plant right here. I would suspect that there are vendors or suppliers that would also come on as a result of this, that would feed that particular steel plant and the other ones in the area. And then just economic development wise, what does this position Arkansas for in your recruiting other industry here?
Absolutely. There's going to be a lot of suppliers that are looking to get close to U.S. Steel, and what a great company to have in the name, in U.S. Steel, that goes back to Andrew Carnegie, over 100 years ago when this has started, and the legacy of that company continues. So another thing, it's, we talk about the influx of imported steel as it relates to national security, and we've seen the supply chain issues. If we can source more of that domestically, and that's ultimately what this plant does, is allow us to source more domestically from our steel, and a great company, a U.S. company like U.S. Steel, certainly helps us. But the suppliers who want to be associated with that, for economic developers all in that region and throughout the state, that gives us something that we can go in and try to recruit around that. But then also, it also ultimately helps us on the end game too, on their customers. Who are they selling to? This is very high-end steel that's going into electric vehicles, or the batteries that go into electric vehicles, which is the next wave of the automobile industry. So that really positions us well when we go in and try to sell Arkansas as a destination for an automobile assembly plant or something in the supply chain of that. Because we have this in our backyard, we have that supply chain, and we can cut down on that transportation time, makes us that much more attractive as a state.
All right, he's Mike Preston, Arkansas Secretary of Commerce, and perhaps he may become a new Pittsburgh Steelers football fan. I'm not sure, so be careful with that. There's Cowboys and Chiefs and Saints and some other folks in Arkansas. You want to be careful where your allegiances are.
That's right.
All right, thank you for your time, Mike. Appreciate you.
Thanks, Roby.